What is the main difference between indoctrination and intuition? Indoctrination and intuition can often feel the same way because they come from belief systems and they also come from a place of, yes, this is right. But they come from completely different sources. Indoctrination comes from what everyone has told us our whole lives, and our intuition comes from our higher self and our knowing. But how can we tell the difference? How can we address them? And how can we turn indoctrination to intuition? Tune in today and find out. You're listening to the Intuitive Mastery podcast. Hi, I'm kateconnolly, and with over 15 years of intuitive healing and teaching experience, I'm here to help you celebrate intuition and value authenticity to create a world where you have the freedom to live your best life. This podcast is here to teach you how to apply the principles of spirituality, healing, and mindset to have true and lasting joy, all from the inside out. This is the Intuitive Mastery podcast. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to talk to you today about the concept of intuition versus indoctrination. And it's a little bit difficult to sometimes understand the difference between them. So I want to break it down and give you guys some awareness about how they can show up differently, but they can also feel exactly the same. So what I mean is, how can we tell the difference between us following our knowing versus following what we've always done and is a general belief system? So, a general belief system might be along the lines of how we parent or how we show up in relationships. It might be the indoctrination might be around how we view certain things. So, for example, and this is what inspired today's session, by the way, is I'm reading The Queen's Code, which is this incredible book by Alison Armstrong, and I strongly encourage it for most women, actually, if not all women, to have a bit of a concept about how we view men. And men in general are massively misunderstood by women, but also the way that we've been taught to think about men. Is that true? Have we been indoctrinated to think about men in a certain way? Or is our intuition guiding us in that direction? That's one big example. When we look at the difference with parenting, the difference between controlled crying and the difference between attachment parenting. They're completely and totally different. Which one is indoctrination? Which one is intuition? That's a good question. And everybody's going to have a different answer to this. So I'm not going to tell you what to think and believe because this is about you exploring yourself and your knowing. But I'll kind of give you some concepts around what indoctrination looks like instead of intuition, or vice versa, and then also how they play out differently. So, indoctrination is this concept that there is a generalized belief system around something, and that generalized belief system brings out a generalized way of thinking and talking and behaving. And if we have a generalized belief system, then most people are going to generally behave that way. So, the belief system that we need to eat more fruit and vegetable, that's an indoctrination, or is it intuition? That's a good question. But regardless of what it is, the indoctrination that came in with the food pyramid in I don't even know when it was, maybe the 1950s. And it had this pyramid, and at the bottom of it, it said, have mostly grains. And then above that, I think it was like meat and dairy and poultry. And then I think above that was vegetables. And I think above that was something else. And water was at the top. And I remember even when I was learning that, thinking, oh, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. That doesn't really feel very intuitive. But the generalized population had been taught this for decades, and everybody believed that this is how you eat. You eat mostly grains, and then, maybe it was vegetables and meat, but it was a really interesting kind of food pyramid. And most people have been completely and totally indoctrinated into eating that way. Is that the right thing for our health? Is actually the right thing for your own intuition and how you eat? I don't know, maybe, maybe not. But the people that created that food pyramid were also coming from the commercial field of cereals, which made that food pyramid sit in a particular way. So whether you choose to follow that may be the difference between being indoctrinated or following your intuition. And it seems very, very controversial because as soon as we come out of this concept of indoctrination, you will hit massive resistance. And this is part of the whole journey of intuition. What I'm saying may or may not be true for you, and that's okay. You have to follow your own gut. But if you're not really sure if you're following your indoctrination or your intuition, I'll explain it to you. So, the intuition is really kind of that sense of following yourself, listening only to your own opinion, and knowing that at any point you are doing the right thing by you and your family and your community. Now, indoctrination often feels exactly the same way from the perspective of everybody believes this. This is what I'm doing, and I'm going to keep doing it because this is what we've always done, and this is the general belief system. I've been told that I must have 5 to 7 serves of grains per day. I've been told that I must have X amount of serves of vegetables. I've been told that I must have whatever. All right. This is one example of indoctrination. When I look at diets and intuitive eating, not that this podcast is about that, it's not, but when I look at that, everybody has a 100% different makeup and different requirement for their bodies. There is a huge difference between how people detoxify. There is a huge difference between how people need to get energy. There's a huge difference when people are chronically stressed versus not chronically stressed. There's huge differences there. And so how you show up and then how you eat is going to be incredibly different depending on who you are. So if I was to give everyone this complete blanket way of eating, a lot of people would actually end up worse off. And this is why blanket diets typically don't work. But let's say we move it into, for example, the indoctrination about how women treat men. Do women treat men in a way that brings out the best in them? In my opinion, absolutely not. Alison Armstrong refers to this concept of frog farming. So, where women are out being frog farmers, they actually, rather than empower and uplift men, they tend to emasculate them or castrate them into a place of becoming their worst. And most women have no idea that they're doing it. I certainly did not because I've done that as well. And I teach this stuff for a living. So learning how to unlearn it is a massive eye opener and it's very, very exciting. But the main reason we behave the way that we do towards men, not all women, and definitely not all men, but I'm going to say the generalized view is that we do not treat men in a way that bring out their best. And how do we do this and how do we know this information? Well, it's basically through indoctrination. Now, you could also argue that, and I've argued this before, I've also discussed and treated things in my relationship from a place of belief and what I thought was intuition at times, but for the large part was actually indoctrination. And the main reason I know it's indoctrination versus intuition, and this is how we can tell the difference, because when we think we're doing it from the same place, don't forget we're doing it from our belief systems. Our intuition will come from our belief systems, and our indoctrination will also come from our belief systems. But what if what if our beliefs are wrong? What if they're not actually serving us? And the main 2 or 3 ways that you can figure this out is that indoctrination does not feel good in its application and its outcome. When you are treating a person a certain way, when you're treating your body a certain way and it doesn't feel good, it means it isn't good. And the outcome is almost always bad, right? It can end up in arguments, it can end up in feeling sick, it can end up in ways that you don't intend and don't want, right? That is how we can often tell the difference between the indoctrination and the intuition. When we're coming from a place of intuition and we're really kind of connecting into our higher self energy, it will feel good and balanced in its delivery. You will not be doing it from reaction at all. And it will almost always have a good outcome because you are following the concept and the ideas of your higher self. You're also following what's in your highest good, and everything is actually going to start feeling really aligned for you. Okay. The outcome of your relationships will likely get better, and the outcome of your health, if you're eating intuitively, will get better. So, when we have a bit of a look at things and we're doing behavioral patterns that don't feel good and don't end up well, then maybe we need to ask ourselves, are we doing this from a place of indoctrination, or am I doing this from a place of intuition? And the way that that shows up often is that we just feel very uncomfortable with ourselves. We might go into doubt and shame cycles if we're doing it from a place of indoctrination. We might have this feeling that just something doesn't feel quite right and I don't know what it is. We might be realizing and recognizing that we're behaving from reaction rather than from response. So the reaction is kind of that knee-jerk subconscious belief system stuff that often isn't serving us. But what happens then if we're really coming from a place of intuition instead? We're coming from our knowing. It usually feels really calm and peaceful and balanced. And the way that we deliver it is going to be more calm and balanced than if we're in reaction, because we've also had a chance to be conscious about our response. And the outcome is always going to be better because we've come from a place of love, not fear. So indoctrination is usually just coming from a place of response. Not response, reaction. And that reaction can often be fear. And when we come from our intuition, we usually come from a place of love and knowing. And they have very, very different energies when they're delivered. And because they have very different energies when they're delivered, they will have very, very different outcomes. So, how do we get from then indoctrination to intuition? And number one, I think one of the biggest confusing things for me and probably for other people in this journey is, okay, that's cool. I don't want to be indoctrinated anymore, but I don't know how to be. I don't know what to do differently. And my encouragement to you is get educated, like learn differently. We're not born with good communication skills. Human beings are not born with communication skills. We have to learn them. It's a skill. It is a skill that you have to learn. So if you know that communication is not your strong suit and you usually communicate from a place of indoctrination rather than intuition, if you come from a place of, reaction rather than response, and if you come from a family and growing up where there was often arguments and lack of response and more reaction, then you may need to have a look at how to communicate. You may need to read a book, go to a conference, go to a therapist, find something that's actually going to educate you in how to do it differently. So that's number one. That's a really big part. But the second big part, which is almost bigger than the first one, is we have to review our beliefs. So, firstly, we have to be really willing to collapse old belief patterns. Right? I need to be willing, number one, to collapse the concept that that food pyramid is correct. I need to collapse the concept that the way that I've treated men or women treat men is okay and correct for men. I need to be able to collapse that and go into a place of surrender to learning how to do it differently, and also healing those belief systems that have kept me in the old paradigm. There's lots of ways in which we can heal belief systems, but usually it's around giving ourselves a whole heap of acceptance, forgiveness, and love around how we've been. And once we become conscious of something, and especially when we get into this place of conscious incompetence, when we get to a place of conscious incompetence, which is basically becoming aware of what you're not doing correctly, the most important thing is to not self-bash, because that will keep us there. That will keep us in a place of suffering. And the whole idea is to get out of that suffering. So once we become aware that we've been doing things wrong our whole lives, whatever that looks like, and wrong, is in inverted commas. What is wrong? We do our best. Everyone does our best all the time. There is no wrong. But when we find a better way, we have to be really compassionate to ourselves about the fact that we did what we knew was best. We did the best that we could with the information that we have. Now the information has changed, and now I'm choosing to do it differently. And if you can look at it from that perspective rather than, oh my goodness, how come I didn't know this? If only I'd done this, then maybe, I wish I'd been taught this earlier. Oh my goodness, what damage have I done, etc. All of that just serves to keep us in pain, and it keeps us in that place of indoctrination. So it is actually super, super important that we cut ourselves some slack, have a whole bunch of self-compassion around it, and give ourselves permission to just love and forgive ourselves for how we've created things because we didn't know differently. Okay? We cannot do what we don't know, and we cannot be what we don't believe or we don't understand. So when we can get out of that place of indoctrination, there is going to be a few steps of education, healing beliefs, not self-bashing, and then really proactively stepping into a new way of being. So stepping into how we want to be differently. Then once we kind of understand and we get a piece of education that really resonates with us, we're going to have this massive heart opening about, oh my goodness, this feels so much better. So if it's a food pyramid and you've come across this other food pyramid that actually makes so much more sense to you, your whole body is going to jump for joy and it's going to say, yes, this is it. When you go to an education seminar, potentially about relationships or anything in your life that you've struggled with, and the information just resonates with your body, you're going to feel your heart open. Everything's going to be a massive yes, right? It's a full body yes. That full body yes is your intuition going, this is it, this is it, don't let this go, this is what you need. Okay. Now, don't forget, you can also ask for this. So if you've realized that you've been indoctrinated in something and you want to change it into an intuitive belief, into something that feels right for you, ask your guides, ask your angels, ask them to bring it in. Universe, please give me the information that I need to fix this. We can unconsciously call it in as well, or consciously, depending on how you see it, through things like tapping, affirmations, trying to manifest things, all of those trying to create our own reality programs or things that we do. So whether we do it through meditation or tapping or diarizing or manifesting or whatever it is that we're trying to do, when we're trying to bring in a new reality for ourselves, all of these indoctrinations will come up as well. You'll become aware of all of these things that you've done that haven't served you, right? So one of the big things that I've been tapping in the past year, and that's even just aside from my career, is about having this perfect family constellation where the family constellation is full respect, full connection, and full love. And that's not just between my husband and I, that's with every single spoke of that constellation. And I'm talking about my immediate family of 6. And when I tap for that, everything that isn't comes to the surface. Everything that isn't aligned with respectful, connected, and love is like thrown in my face. And it's like, Kate, you haven't sorted this out. This is an indoctrination pattern. You haven't actually sat in your intuition, or you haven't actually sat in this belief system yet. So how about we fix it? And so my conversation then becomes, oh, okay, this is obviously not working very well. What do I need to do differently? And then I seek education. And it always comes to me in the form of someone or something that makes me aware of, oh my goodness, this is it. This is what I don't know. And it's such an exciting moment for me. The Queen's Code is one of them. And one of my colleagues who I work with on a regular basis, she kind of brought it up for me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that book sounds so familiar. And it was literally on a list of books that I'd written down to read about 10 years ago. Well, not written down, it's in my phone. And I look back through the list, and I've read, interestingly enough, about 2/3 of them, but I hadn't read this one. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this has been on my radar for 10 years and I haven't picked it up yet. And when I got it and when I started reading it, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is it. This is what I'm missing. This is what I haven't done. And I have to remember not to go into self-bash. I have to remember to go, okay, this is the education that I need to be a better person, to show up as a better wife, to show up as a better parent, to show up as a better role model for my kids. This is amazing. So my tapping for this connected, respected, and loving family has brought up all of the stuff that I haven't been able to do to create that as my reality. And it's a beautiful thing because now I have the education. I can tell you about it, I can learn about it, and I can practice it in my life. So the education is such an important part. Don't be afraid to be educated in things that you do not know. This is how we become better. It's so important to remember and recognize that whole body yes, and then start to do things in your behavior that feel good, that feel like you're doing the right thing, that doesn't send you into shame and guilt spirals, right? And that is where you step fully into your intuitive knowing, right? You start doing things that actually feel really good rather than doing things that you used to do because you should do them. Okay? It's a massive difference. And the outcomes are phenomenally different because all of a sudden you're not going to go into those not feeling good moments, and the people around you are going to respond in kind. You are actually going to reap the rewards through your relationships, through your health, through whatever it is that's showing up for you that you know that you haven't done correctly for yourself and for your world. Remembering that I'm using correctly in a very, very loose term, all right? Because correct is, it's relative. It's relative between people, and everyone's going to have different belief systems and everyone's going to have a different way of thinking. However, there are a lot of universal truths out there. And once you become aware of them and you try them and they work, that becomes your strong, massive belief system. And that becomes the vibration from which you work at. And the more people that vibrate at that particular rate, you will then help other people do that as well. And it is, very possible to bastardize, what you've learned and make it your own. There are ways of, making things worse as well. If your belief systems are not sorted, the education isn't going to help. So if you haven't healed the part of you that, for example, feels like you need to follow the doctor's orders or follow what the TV says about your food, and if you have this strong belief that they have a better, authority than you will struggle with changing your diet. You will struggle with eating intuitively because you must let go of those paradigms first. And the same thing with, relationships. If you cannot let go of the paradigm with which you've functioned in the past, you will not be able to behave differently. So it is super important to heal those parts of you, sending oneness, forgiveness, and love to those parts of you that have not behaved in your best interests. And then when you can do that, you have the opportunity and the power to create massive and very powerful and positive change in your life. And it's very exciting. This is a game changer. It can change you, it can change every part of your life in a really positive and very functional way. So, I guess number one, if you're not sure if you're indoctrinated or doing it intuitively, listen to your thoughts and listen to your feelings. All right. If something doesn't feel right, it isn't. Trust it. Right. But just get curious, right? And give yourself permission to experiment as well. So all new good theories come from, oh, this doesn't feel right. I think I want to do something differently. And when you do step into that doing something differently and it works better, this is how we learn, right? This is how we become better humans. This is how we show up more powerfully in our relationships and our lives, with our health, with everything that we have in our lives. So I encourage you to get curious, love yourself as you get curious. ask questions, right? Get educated and start going with that full body yes on things. And if there are many areas of your life that don't have a full body yes, I strongly encourage you to have a bit of a look at all the different areas that might be impacting you. All right. So I do have a quiz. It's in the link below. It's a drop form quiz, and it's basically looking at all the different areas of your life and which part of it might be the most important for you to address and have a look at. And if you're not sure, this quiz will really highlight that for you. It will give you a lot of information. So I strongly encourage you to do that if you're curious. And outside of that, I want you to just be really, really calm and confident with your knowing if it feels like a full body yes when you're doing it. And I don't mean a full body victory. I've just put that person under a tractor and they're gonna lose and they're gonna, learn their lesson or whatever it might be. That is not the same thing. I'm talking about a full heart opening. This feels totally right. I feel totally aligned with this, and this makes me feel amazing. Then you know you're on the right track. All right. I hope that was really helpful. Have a wonderful week, and I will tune in and see you next time.